Okay, so in this tutorial I want to show you how to create post requests to the backend. This time it will be post requests without any credentials, but you can research yourself how to add the credentials. So how to post to restricted URLs, for example, how to create a job. In this time we will just create an application to a job, which is of course possible for users that are not logged in. So first, we of course always need to start up our server. So npm run start. I will do this now at once again the state of a empty job list. So if you have followed maybe the other tutorials, then your project will look differently. But I would just want to make sure that this works for everybody, even if they didn't watch the other tutorials. So what I will do it very simple. So of course, in the normal application, you will have this button that opens the module, and inside of that you will have the application functionality. In my case, I will make it even simpler. I will just have no module. It will just be displayed the form here. And I will always, when you click on the button, it will always just apply for the same job. So you will have to use props maybe into the component if you want to have some kind of dynamic functionality to apply to the different jobs. So here in the job list, maybe we want to display this form. So to make it already some kind of modular, we will create a component. So this component will be called maybe application form. And we will just always apply to maybe a job, I think with ID 4. So I will show you now. I'm here in Yag. Our logged in user has 2 jobs. So there are 2 jobs from this user, front and backend developer, and there has been so there is only one application right now in the system by this by the person Jon Snow to the job ID 3, so to the front-end developer job. So we will create something that applies to the backend developer, so to the ID 6. Okay, so here we will just do ID 6. Of course, when you later do it properly, dynamically, you will maybe have to take in some prop here that then always applies to the job that, well, is applicable for that case. So we will, for now, maybe just return something like this, and we will once again use React Bootstrap. So we will once again use the form from React Bootstrap. We need to, of course, import it. So import form, and later we will also need the button from React-Bootstrap. Okay. So we will create a form group, which will bundle all our inputs. Okay, and inside of that we will have form controls. They will take in the data for the name, the user, and for the name, the email, and maybe the CV, so the experience. Okay, so what we will need is to define the names of all those fields. So the first will be actually the full name, the second the email, and the third the CV. Maybe if you also take in the URL for the photo, you will also add this. Okay, then we add the types for all those fields. The first and the last will be, of course, just a text type, but the one in the middle is actually a special email type. Okay, when we also for the styling, we can add placeholders, something like the name, maybe here something like xmail@example.com, and here something like your experience ... So now we will have nothing, because we of course have created the application form, but we are not including it anywhere. So here we will add this application form. Okay, so now we expect exactly this. You can later, I don't know, have it multiple times. However, you to design your system, you of course will have this component, and inside of each card you will have one such instant of this component, which will maybe be the modal. Okay, so we have one application form now. We also need to add the button, which will be the submission button. So it will has as text apply now, but it's important here the type has to be submit, so that actually the form will be submitted when the user clicks on it. Okay, so maybe first of all we will handle all the state. So storing the state and representing the state inside of those fields. This is also, I'm also covering that in the next tutorial. So yeah, depending on the order of you watching this, you will hear 2 times. Okay, so first of all, always when we cover state, we need the use state from React, at least in the way that we are handling state in this project. So what we maybe want to have is like one object that contains all the form data. So maybe let's first create like some initial object that will just be empty data points. Okay, so again, like the state in the React, we will always have this variable and the function that changes the state. So maybe form data and set form data, and by default this will just contain an object where each of those fields is just empty. So the name will be the empty string, the email will be the empty string, and the CV will be the empty string. Okay, so now this is the form data, and here we can now do, we need to do the two-way binding, right? So on the one hand, those fields should always display whatever is stored in this data, but on the other way around, also whatever the user types into those controls should be then stored in the form data. So for the first path, basically, we will say, okay, we want this value to always be form data.name, and similarly for the other fields. So here form data.email, and here form data.cv. Okay, and now we also want to make sure that whenever a user types in here, right now typing is not really possible, that whenever the user types in here, the value of this state should be changed. Okay, so we will now define a function that will handle any such change. So maybe we'll call it also handle change. And it will take in a variable e, which will be the event basically that is triggered when the user types in something here. Okay, so now we will define for each of those input fields that whenever this field changes, we want to call this handle change function. Okay, so here also, and here also. So here you see that for every of those controls, we will always call the same function. So this function has to be somehow able to handle all of the inputs, all of the input fields. Okay, so let's say the user changes the email, right? We will handle this event that will be then passed into this handle change. Okay, so maybe it would be interesting for you to actually look how this event looks. So maybe the first thing that is of relevance will be the target name of this event. So now when we type in here something, we will see, okay, the target name of this, because we typed in this email field, is called email. And then maybe also the other data point of interest, it's the value, although in this case it will always empty. Okay, so now if I type in a x, then as the value of the change, we will see x. Okay, so now what we want to do, of course, is to update the form data to reflect this change of this field. So if the user types in something into the email field, the email part of this object should change. Okay, but because this set form data, it always changes, resets the whole form data object. So what we need to do is when we call the set form data, we will set the whole object. And what we basically need to make, what we will do is we use this JavaScript spread operator like this. So what this does is it just takes all the old fields, so name, email, and CV, and puts them in here. So it basically says, okay, first set the form data to whatever we had before. But additionally, so this doesn't change really anything, it just sets it to the values of before. But additionally, we will say, but we want to override the key that was changed. So before, when I was typing into the email field, this returned email, the string email, and we want to override this field, so the email field, with the value that the user typed in. So in this case, like this. Okay, but not the semicolon, but a comma, because of course this is inside the object. Okay, so now we set the form data to whatever we had before, and additionally we override the field where the user is currently typing in with the value that the user has typed in. So maybe if I additionally add some alert, that will write the eTarget name and the eTarget value, maybe like this, then you will be able to visualize this. Okay, so now I will type in something to the email field. So now the name of this is email, and the value that I have typed in is D. So I will have to D. Now I will type in @ symbol. Now the email field is still the one we are typing at, but now the value is D and @. And then, like for every character, we will always update the form data. Okay. This, of course, we don't want. We always just want to handle the change, and this handle change should store the data inside of this state hook, state variable. Okay. So now we have this two-way binding. So now we can type in here, and always form data is reflected. So maybe if we display form data here, I don't know if we can display it like this. Probably not, because it's, but maybe we can, for example, the name. Exactly, so this is the name. Maybe email also. So right now we just see the name. Additionally, the email. Of course, here's not any break symbol. Okay, so yeah. we now see that the values that we type in here are also correctly represented in the state variables of React. Okay. Good. So now what we additionally want to make is to actually, when the user clicks on the submit button, something should happen. Right now what will happen, it will just submit it to some like default URL that the browser guesses, thinks is the correct way of submitting the data. But what we want to instead is to take the data and then send it to the API / applications URL and to post it to them. So we will first define this function that is supposed to handle the submit. It again will take in this event. And we want to define that whenever the user submits the form, so clicks on this submit button, that we want to call this handle submit. Okay, so the first thing that we have to do is to prevent the default browser behavior. So that's why we'll write it this. So what now will happen is basically we will not send it anywhere. So just to visualize that actually this function is called, when I click on this, this is alerted, but nothing else happens. Okay, So what we want to do maybe first is to check whether all required fields are actually put in. So maybe if we want to define this as required, we would type in here required. Okay, and here we would then add an if statement. So this if statement will then check if the form that we want to check, so we somehow need to get this form. How do we get the form? We get the form also from the event by writing e.currentTarget. And then we just check if this form is actually valid. And if it's not valid, then we will just stop handling it and we will return from this function. So we will just stop the execution of this function. Otherwise, so let's say the required fields are put in, we will try to actually then collect this data and send it to the backend. So if you want to see again in this API documentation, you also have a PDF of that in the Moodle. To create a application to a job, we need to submit a post request to this URL with a body like this. So it has to contain the job ID, the name, email, photo. I guess we can also just send in a empty string and the CV. Because right now we of course don't have any photo field. So here we will now add this fetch request. So like always, we use fetch to send requests. The URL that we need is stored here. /API/applications. We need to send it to the local host because we are running it locally. So like this. But we also need to define that it has to be a post request and some other headers and some other options. So the first thing that we say is that we want to post because we want to send data to the endpoint. Additionally, we define some headers. You can just copy this. This. Also headers, and then just like this, content time application.json. And then we say the body. So the body will actually contain all the data that we actually sent to the backend. So what this has to contain is all those fields here. We will put in all those fields. Okay, so the first thing, of course, is the job ID. How do we get the job ID? Okay, so normally you will probably pass it in the job object here as a prop. We right now just have it stored like this. So we will always apply to this job, and we get the ID field by writing job dot and then the ID field. Okay, the other fields are right now stored in the form data. So the name is inside of form data.name. The email is in form data.email. The CV is in form data.cv. And the photo, I don't know, we will just send an empty string. Good. And all of this, we need to convert it into a string so that we can send it. Good. So this is the fetch request. Now, one important thing is this fetch is like asynchronous. So because we are sending something to the backend, and while the backend is running, storing it in the database, we need to wait for this to finish in the backend. So we will write this wait. We can just write it in front of this. And now we're getting an error. This error says that we can only use a wait in an async function. That's why we just write async in front of this function. Good. So we are now sending the data, but maybe we also want to handle whatever the server will then return to us. So we will then store the response that is returned from this. And we will then check mainly one thing, if this response is okay. So if it's not okay, we will throw an error. And then maybe we can somehow handle this error later. So fail to submit application. Okay. And if this is not the case, so everything is okay, then we can just reset the form data. So because of course after submitting our application, we want to delete all of whatever we have written into the form fields. So we will write set form data again, and set it to a new object, and this new object should just have all the fields as empty strings. So email empty string, CV empty string, exactly. Good. Now here, of course, we are throwing an error, and at some other points errors could happen. So we will put all of this into a try catch. So like this. We'll try all of that. And in case any error happens, we basically catch it, like an exception in Python, for example, also. And if such error happens, we'll just write, we'll create an alert maybe. Okay, good. So I think now we have everything that should be required for it to work, I hope. So we will now create this application. So let's say as a name we have backend developer, then maybe as the email backend at email.com, and as an experience, I don't know, maybe Java Spring Boot and SQL experience. Good. So now when we click on apply, I hope that there will be no error. Okay. And you see that after submitting the data, the form was reset to just have empty fields. And now we will check if actually the backend correctly stored all this data in a database. For this, we will go again to Yark. We will see, okay, so in my jobs, we have those two jobs, right? The backend developer, which is what we applied now because we set ID 6. Okay, so now we will see here in applications, we will send this request again, and I hope we expect there to now be two applications. Okay, so now we see we have this application from before, and this is a new application by a person called backend developer with this email, with this experience, and to the job with ID number 6. Here we also get more information about the job. Okay, so now we see that whatever we wrote here correctly makes post requests to a endpoint, and it correctly sends all this data to the endpoint. And this makes it possible to, for example, in this case, apply to jobs. Okay, so maybe what will be relevant, two more things that you would have to do in when you actually do this in the project. Here right now in the application form, we just create it like this. So maybe later when you map over all the jobs, you will of course have one model for the application for each of the jobs. And of course, each application form or model should then apply for the correct job. So somehow you need to pass in the ID or the whole job object into those components. And I hope you still remember the idea of props, which basically you will write like this. So you would say job is equal to maybe however you have stored it. So maybe if you have this job object here, which says ID what's the other one? 3 for the front-end job. And then you pass in the job here. And then you would take this object, this job object here, and then you can work with it. So now we have this job object here. And now we can maybe have, we properly pass in the job object into our application form via a prop. So this would be more or less how you would do it then later on in your actual project. Because of course you will maybe have multiple of those models, right? In each job card you will have one one such model for the application. So you need to somehow give the information about which job to apply to the model. Okay, so you pass this information via a prop. This is one important thing, and the other important thing is maybe also for later on when you will create the functionality for sending a post request to something that where authentication is required. So for example, to create a new job, you need to of course be logged in. And you also need to then pass on this information to the server. So inside of this, you will need to also include the credentials. So maybe I can show you this. It's also included into one of the PowerPoints of the tutorials, but so what you need to do is in the fetch call, you need to define that you want to include the credentials. I hope here's somewhere a example, maybe not. Credentials. Exactly. So what you will need to define is that you want to have the credentials and you want to include them. Maybe there's an option somewhere here, example. Okay, so I cannot find an example right now, but if you just Google for examples, you will find that it will be something like this. We just write credentials, include, and then this will basically make it that like the cookie that stores the authentication token in the browser will be also passed along with this whole post request to the backend. And then the backend can make sure that you're actually allowed to, for example, create a job or other such things. So yeah, this is how you include the credentials in a post request, or in any request actually, also for maybe a delete request, which will be important for the delete functionality. Good, so I hope you have now an overview how to create a form that posts data to an endpoint, how to store the data in like a object in the state, how to handle updates, and how to handle the submit.